Excellent. Well, I just want to welcome everyone today. My name is Ryan Moore, a senior partner here at Talentfoot Executive Search. I want to thank you for joining us today on our LinkedIn Live session, where we're going to be talking about the anatomy of today's top sales leaders. Here at Talentfoot, our mission is to enable companies to drive sustainable growth by helping them recruit high-performing sales leaders, marketing, and tech into their teams. Today, we're going to be diving into what makes up a top-performing sales leader in today's world. We have a powerhouse panel that's going to help us sort of break that down and talk about the sort of modern take that sales has evolved to and what it means to be a sales leader today. And as you're looking to grow your sales career, sort of what are the skills that you need to be keeping an eye on and adding? So I'm going to sort of work around the room and let everybody introduce themselves. I'll start with Michelle.
Thanks, Ryan. Hi, everybody. My name is Michelle Tran. I'm based in the Bay Area in sunny California, as you can see behind me. I have a long career in commercial leadership, sales leadership, and financial services, dating all the way back from my days at BlackRock, where I led a number of teams focused on private banks within the ETF space, and then saw really the real advent of fintechs and how they're really changing the marketplace, and have since joined a number of smaller startup firms, really democratizing and providing access to a number of financial services products, everything from clearing custody to multifamily office products, and was most recently at Vestwell. Vestwell itself is a digital 401k platform providing holistic workplace savings. And I was just sharing with Ryan and the team earlier, recently have left Vestwell and working on a new opportunity, which I'll be sharing very soon. In addition, I am embedded in the fintech space. I'm the co-founder of NYC Fintech Women, very passionate about women and fintech and how do we promote women in fintech. We have 12,000 members, primarily based in New York, but everywhere now, including San Francisco, Chicago, and London. So really excited to have this conversation about modern sales.
Thanks, Michelle. Welcome. Trish, if you want to do your intro.
Sure. Hi, everyone. Trish Chupek. I am currently the Chief Growth Officer at Digital Media Solutions, which is a performance marketing company. I've been in media marketing my entire career, starting off my career in sales for Lego Toys way back in the day, moving into the agency side on the media side of the house, and now on the performance marketing. Sales reports to me, as does our distribution team, so in essence, our media team. And I'm looking forward to this conversation. I do think, if I think back to my early days in sales and where sales is currently sitting, it has changed and evolved dramatically, all for the better, but it definitely puts a lot more demands on the salesperson. And I'm looking forward to this conversation today.
Excellent. Welcome. And last but not least, Brian, my colleague here at Talentfoot, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sounds good. Thank you, Ryan. And thank you, Michelle and Trish, for joining us. I'm Brian Kopp. Currently, I'm a senior partner here at Talentfoot. I've been here about 4.5 years. I currently serve as the team lead for our sales practice. So what I do is I help clients hire A-level sales talent, anything from individual contributors all the way up to CROs or CGOs. And what they do is they help drive top-line revenue and company growth. So those are the individuals that I find for companies and our clients, and just help grow Talentfoot and help them grow their careers.
Perfect. Excellent. All right, let's dig right into a meaty topic. So we have a few sort of areas that we're going to hit on first, that we want to sort of lay some groundwork, and then we're going to end up going and asking, towards the end, we're going to save about 10-15 minutes where we'll answer some of the questions that are coming up through LinkedIn. So let's sort of kick things off by talking about the evolution of B2B sales. Michelle, I'm going to throw this one over to you. How has the anatomy of the B2B selling process changed with the advent of some of the digitization that's happening, PLG, and even more around sort of the autonomous buyer?
Yeah, it's a great question, and definitely one that has become more and more top of mind in the past several years, especially through the pandemic, and we've all really had to change our selling style. For those who are not familiar, PLG, product-led growth, is a way, excuse me, sneeze. Um, Product-led growth is a way for buyers to purchase a product without interacting with any reps. And so they can go through an experience on their own. I think the anatomy of B2B sales has really changed over time. Whereas, you can think historically where marketing is, a linear approach, right? How do you engage with a user? How do you qualify that user? How does marketing qualify that user and then pass it on to sales? And that's when you have sales interaction. Now it's becoming much, much more so of what we call, an all-bound strategy or an omni-channel approach. So really having different areas and different ways to engage with a user and not just only marketing. And what we're really seeing is, that seller, that salesperson really needing to be flexible in this market and really needing to be, finding ways to have more at bats with those users and those buyers as well. They're getting less and less at bats, less and less in person. Over the past 4 years, as we went hybrid, a lot of people went hybrid, and that has stayed really in a lot of sense. And so salespeople now need to figure out, okay, one, buyers are finding information in all different ways. They're no longer just going to the website. They're getting information from many different sources. Once they're getting that information, how can a seller actually approach that buyer? What are different ways to engage with that buyer? Used to be, all in person. Now there's different hybrid ways to do it. But now as we're coming out of the pandemic, or we're essentially out of the pandemic, how do we think about the approach of both hybrid or in virtual and in person, right? You need to engage decision makers in both ways. And you might have some decision makers who are or virtual only. You might have some decision makers who really value that in person. So really being flexible in terms of your approach.
Perfect. And how has that changed the way you lead your team and coach them when you've now got the complexities and you're dealing with sort of multiple different buyers, and the buyer is coming far more educated than we've ever seen them, potentially almost at decision point? How do you start to reshape how you look at enabling your team and market?
Yeah, it's definitely been a reshaping. I think that's a really great word to describe how do you drive teams to really think about the buyers coming in with more information and having to approach buyers in different places. Really ways that what we've put into, kind of in work within our teams in the past in terms of how do we approach this is one, creating more places and virtual places for people to interact, right? So it's not just meeting people at conferences anymore. What are those webinars? What are those situations where you can find, making sure that you invite those decision makers into the room, making sure the salespeople are also really comfortable. Right now, it's commonplace, and you have to be comfortable with figuring out how to run virtual meetings, and very big virtual meetings as well. You have key decision makers. You might have a managing director of a global wealth firm, and making sure that you're able to present yourself and convey yourself as you would in person. And it takes a lot of practice, right? I think, as everyone remember, in the pandemic, it took a lot of practice to figure out how do we use Zoom, how do we get comfortable. And now it is second nature for a lot of us. And so making sure that people have the tools in order to do so. I think the other piece too is that tool piece is really important. And so because people are getting information in many different places, there's a lot of personalization that needs to happen as well. And so how are you using tools and AI to really help personalize content and personalize outreach to a lot of your clients? We're all busy people. Salespeople have a huge pipeline. We're all trying to get in front of people, and we want to make sure the prospects that we get in front of always feel like it's a very close relationship, right? And so how are we using the right tools in order to do so? So making sure that you arm the team with the right tools and that they're using them effectively and often as well.
Perfect. And favorite tool of yours as an insider tip?
I don't know if I necessarily have a favorite right now. There are a number that, obviously, everything that's kind of around the ChatGPT has been a favorite of mine, as it's saved a lot of time. It's helped create more efficiency on the teams in terms of personalization. But I always tell my team too, you got to be careful with ChatGPT. You got to be careful with that, and just making sure you review everything. I once heard a story of a professor who put in a secret word in her prompt, and caught a lot of students using ChatGPT that way. So it's definitely a tool. You gotta be careful using it.
I think that is the key. It does disclaim that you should check and prove it. I think that should be much bolder and bigger when you're using solutions like that. Just take a read through them, make sure it's sort of saying what you want, and make it personal, right?
I've gotten so many emails who, they call me by the wrong name or they have the wrong company. Whatever it is, there's just like slightly something I know that's not a true personal email. So you just have to be very careful.
Perfect. Trish, anything you would add into that?
I mean, it's interesting because in our organization, sales has both an outbound responsibility as well as overseeing the engagement once a client comes in and is part of us. And so the skill set that we look for is a little bit different. It's a blend of both traditional sales skills, that outbound and how we do that successfully, but really married with, I think, some very relevant leadership qualities and some things that have really changed in the marketplace that puts more demands on them as I start off. And I think a few of those that I really look for and that we are really working on morphing our team around are things like data-driven decision making. Obviously, we're a performance marketing organization, so data is at the center of everything that we do, but elevating it away from just the day in and out sort of task oriented to really data analytics and insights that can really drive different go-to-market strategies, taking a more customer centric approach and ensuring that everything that we do has the customer experience sort of prioritized front and center. We're really focused on innovation and fostering a culture of innovation and continuous improvement. And I'm a big believer, I use a term called perpetual beta mindset. And I think in any business today, you have to possess that just because it worked last month or last year doesn't mean that it's going to work today, given the dynamic nature of the marketplace, the constant consumer changes. So to get a team also oriented toward, and a performance marketing team, this should be sort of core to who they are, but elevating it and thinking about it in terms of what else can we innovate? How do we continue to push? How do we throw away what isn't working, focus on what is working? I think adaptability is super important, embracing change that goes hand in hand with that perpetual beta mindset. And then ultimately coaching and development. We do have a lot of our sales leaders that I would say are more individual contributors, and yet they're managing a team of people. So also having them understand how to really, the importance of nurturing talent, empowering their teams to reach their full potential so that we're getting the full value out of the team and every individual on the team. And then I think the last one that we really focus on is around strategic thinking. And even that has evolved, what is strategy? And it's both an immediate, how do we win in the market today, but also how is everything that we're doing setting our clients and ourselves up for success over the long term. I mean, just this year, we shifted our focus into a fewer, bigger, better focus, which is we don't necessarily want a long tail of clients. We want to work with clients that are core to our success, where we really can win and we are best equipped to help them win in verticals and places that we can win. And that creates a lot of shift. Then you're focusing on fewer so you can go deeper with them. You can be more innovative. You can be more strategic. And I think that those are the kinds of things that are important as we continue to evolve our sales staff at Digital Media Solutions.
Fantastic. And you did a great job at sort of teeing into the next section for me there, Trish, just around when you think about skill sets that you're looking for in market, right? We talked about the market shifted, the modern sales world has shifted. When you think about bringing in sales leaders, you sort of talked about the agility, the being strategic in how you approach the market. What are some of the other skills that you've built over the last couple of years to evolve with the market? But when you even think about bringing in team members, what are you looking for now that you weren't looking for before? This can go to both Michelle, Trish, even Brian, chime in with what clients are looking for and how has that changed?
Yeah, I mean, I talked about a lot of them. I think the only other couple that I would add to what I already talked about was embracing, the digital and technological marketplace and using that to your full advantage. Michelle talked about AI and the good and the bad of that, but it's everything. And in every conversation that I'm in, I'm constantly saying, how do we take that and automate it? How do we take that and make it so really embracing, I think, a tech and looking for people that understand tech savvy and again, in our space and performance, that is central to who we are, but it needs to be on steroids, I think, to be really, really positive. And then balancing that, I would say, with also just a lot of emotional intelligence, that EQ that we talk about. It isn't just all about the sales, and it is all about sales, of course, but it isn't just about driving results, and that it's also making sure that you understand how to get your team motivated around the same kind of goals and things that we have. So that's why I said it's really a blend of traditional sales skills with today's more contemporary leadership skills and sort of everything in between. So there's a lot that we're looking for, and a lot of skill sets and talents that we expect when we bring in leaders in the sales organization.
I would add, especially on the EQ piece, I think the EQ, it's hard to ask a specific question when you're interviewing sales talent on EQ, but you get the sense of it. And the EQ is really important because you think about sales in the day. Sales doesn't stop when you sign a client. Sales continues. It continues throughout the life of the client. What you really want to build is that long-term partnership with that client, not just having a sales client. And having that EQ and being able to drive that relationship is really important. Even if you're passing that relationship on to another team, you're creating, a relationship for long-term for both you personally as well as professionally. So I think that EQ is very important, especially as we're in a world of consultative selling, as we're in a world of how do we build our personal brand, right? As you look on LinkedIn, a lot of sellers are thinking like, who am I as a person? How do I present myself to clients who live in a world of LinkedIn? People are going on LinkedIn to look at credibility. People are looking at LinkedIn to see who they're connected with. You want to make sure you have a brand in the marketplace as well. So do these sales leaders have a brand in the marketplace? I think the other thing to add in terms of, what are some of the things that we look for in sales leadership is being analytical and data-driven and process-driven as well. So really being, and that comes in line with being organized, right? As a salesperson, you really have to have a repeatable process, a consistent process, and you have to bring in those data points, whatever those data points are, to help you sell better. Is it really understanding what is a client problem? Is it understanding what is the marketplace problem? Bringing those data points of what you're seeing and being able to act on them quickly, right? So to what Trish said in terms of the flexibility and the agility, so being really flexible in the marketplace. So those are a couple different items I would add as well in terms of, hey, what are the traits that you want to look for in a sales leader?
Mm-hmm.
Right. And I would add into that with both of you, as we look at sales leaders to bring over to our clients, do they have the potential to learn, to grow, to adapt? That's one of the biggest things. Tell me about a time you did something, you tried it, it didn't work. What did you change the next time you approached that problem?
Mm-hmm.
That shows that growth mindset. And when we talked about this anatomy, we talked about data-driven head. We talked about heart and soul, adding in the EQ, rolling up your sleeves, being hands-on, because I think more and more these sales leaders, even if they're running a team of, 15, 20 AEs, they've got to be hands-on. They've got to be almost that player coach that's in front of the client, showing them, here's the playbook. Follow me. Let's do this. Now you've seen it. Now you go do it. Now teach it. And being able to continue that growth and evolution. And I think, Michelle, you hit on this. Do you have a predictable revenue system? Do you have something that you can take to market, that the process is, you can explain it and you can replicate it? And can you continue to grow it? So those are the types of traits we're looking at as we're looking at sales leaders to bring over to our clients in order to enable that growth that all of our clients are looking for.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that, Brian. I think that the interesting piece to there is the EQ element that we're hearing a lot more discussion around, right? As a sales leader in today's world, you now have a team that's potentially partially in office, partially hybrid, partially remote. That creates leadership challenges and nuances. You also now have 4 to 5 generations in your workforce that you're having to manage with all nuances. And that takes an entirely different skill set that we haven't seen come through in terms of being able to manage those different environments and different sales philosophies. That I think is part of what's happening in the modern sales organization, is this sort of evolution of how do you, as a leader, look after all of that?
Yeah.
And is EQ and its empathy is now becoming so much more of a conversation. I think for years we had it's data, revenue was king, and that's all that mattered about a good sales leader. And we're now seeing that very much sort of way back into, you have to be able to lead with empathy and lead with EQ and understand the team and the dynamics to be able to drive for success.
So Ryan, I think that's you summarized it beautifully. And I think that's part of the complication. I think that's also part of the onus on the organization to be investing in bringing that kind of skills training across the board, not just the technical aspects of sales, but also the leadership aspect of sales, the EQ, the managing across multiple decades of different types of employees that you have. And it doesn't all fall on the shoulders of the salesperson to figure it out. It also falls on the shoulders of the organization to be investing in making sure that they're up leveling their salespeople and giving them all the tools and the skills and the training that they need as well.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. It needs to be a united front there to be able to make that happen. And I think the other piece that I've heard sort of from clients, and we've started to allude to in this conversation, is the concept of efficiency is becoming more and more prevalent in a sales org. And it's the first time in a very long time consistently hearing clients talk about a criteria when looking for a sales leader of someone who understands how to create efficiency in the sales org. Love to hear from both of you, sort of where is that coming from? I think people automatically jump to that means reducing headcount to create efficiency, and that's not what most companies are meaning by efficiency. So I'd love to sort of hear from you as to what does efficiency mean in today's sales leader world?
So I can kick off. Sorry. Yeah, I think there's two conversations here too around efficiency. So efficiency and effectiveness. So efficiency is how do you get things done quickly and in a manner that does reduce costs. And it's not just, cutting roles and cutting, but what are the tools that you can provide to help really make someone's day move faster, make their job easier, right? So there's a lot of leaning in there. What are the processes that need to evolve or that need to innovate in order to help with that efficiency? So there's that mindset of how do we continue to automate? How do we continue to build those efficient pathways for a salesperson and a sales leader? I think that's slightly different. I think efficiency is part of effectiveness. Effectiveness is how do you get that job done? And for a sales leader, that efficiency is a bit different. Right? As a sales leader, you're not necessarily going through, you may not be in that sales seat anymore. You're in that sales leadership. So you're not necessarily going through a checklist of things that you're doing day to day, but you really need to sit and think through strategy. You need to, it's a much harder skill to obtain and to perfect, right? Because we're naturally as human beings just want to get things done. Everyone, I'm sure, has a list that we want to check off and it feels great. But as a sales leader is really taking a step back and understanding, okay, how do I build efficiency in for my organization? How do I do that so we can be more effective overall as a full organization? And so I think there's a little bit of that efficiency. How does that fit into effectiveness conversation?
Yeah, I think those things, I agree, Michelle, that they go hand in hand. And again, I joined my organization now 9 months ago. So the whole efficiency thing, which is what are the replicatable processes that we can, or the processes that we can replicate, the tools that we need, having really clearly defined roles and responsibilities to ensure that the organization or the foundational elements of the organization are working as efficiently as possible. Because I think, to me, where we need to go and what I espouse among is, I think effectiveness is also about speed to market. It's about continuous testing. It is about learning and iterating. And I think you need those foundational elements in place, processes, tools, clearly defined roles and responsibilities to be able to then become a more effective leader around going to market more quickly and smartly, around that continuous testing and iteration and learning component of the effectiveness of what we do. And again, I think technology is essential to delivering on that, and the need for technology and the companies need to invest in technology to do that so that we can get to the most efficient and effective way of working.
Excellent. Yeah, it's the velocity in your pipeline is a lot of where conversation has spun with clients I've talked to and other leaders. and that efficiency or effectiveness piece comes in. It's that, how do you create that velocity in your pipeline? And it's the AI or the new tools. It's how do you start to look at truncating or shortening sales cycles, understanding sort of buyer indications earlier to be able to do that. So I think that's all extremely important in how we think about that efficiency. And I love the effectiveness tie-in, Michelle, around that role. When you think about sort of looking at talent in today's market, what are you looking for from a DNA perspective? If you're thinking about bringing in sales leaders, how do you start to figure out how to find some of these skills, or do you coach them? What are you looking for? Michelle, if you don't mind chiming in sort of from SMB mid-market perspective, how do you start to look for DNA for that type of sales leader?
Yeah, I think there's definitely always coaching, right? Even myself, there's always continuous learning and coaching, especially as there are new tools and there's kind of just new ways to operate in the marketplace. So, kind of DNA, I think, goes back to, what we talked about previously in terms of how are they using data? I sound like a nerd here, but I continue to go back to how are you continuing using data as you think about prospecting and clients and pipeline? How are you, what is your approach in terms of marketplace, in terms of getting out there in the market? When you think about leaders who are, do they have a personality where they're decisive? Are they authoritative? Do they command presence? Right, and it depends on you're working a lot with those that are running the business, decision makers, key decision makers. You're talking to the CEOs. You're talking to those that are running the business. How can you be effective to them? Right. So again, that kind of goes back to how do you consultative sell in a way? This is not a pure transactional sale. You're not just selling them a product and walking away. It always reminds me of like Cutco knives. I don't know if you guys remember Cutco knives. In college, you go door to door and sell Cutco knives and you move on. World now is that you have to think about yourself as a consultative salesperson. You're building a relationship for the long term, even if you're going to take that relationship not from your current company to the next company or wherever it is. You never know where those relationships can take you. So how are you being consultative along the way? That's a big part of that DNA. How is that person being resourceful? Are they organized? And are they focused? Right? You could quickly tell in interviews as you're talking to folks too, if they are having a focused conversation. Not only are they articulate, but are they creating, scenarios for you where you're really understanding, their approach and their process and their repeatable process. So those are kind of some of the things that we look for from a leadership standpoint.
Perfect. Yeah, and it's becoming more and more equal soft skill, hard skill in sales. Being able to talk about how do you create those compelling stories and how do you lead and present in a different way that's not been what we traditionally had. And I think we always, Brian, and you can sort of chime in on this too, we used to always vet candidates and it was know your numbers, but now it's a different set of numbers that we're asking them to dig into from a business. It's more around conversion rates at sales leadership. How are you creating or increasing speed to close a deal? How are you improving the team that you have? So those numbers, while we're still asking them, I think are changing as to what we're asking, right? It was always how much revenue did you produce or how much growth did you achieve? And I think those are all important numbers still, but it's shifting now to a different set of data points that I think are important for that new leader to understand, if that's what I think sort of where you were talking, Michelle, correct?
Yes. Yeah, correct.
Perfect. Trish, if we piggyback off of that and you're looking to hire, how does that change your hiring process? As a leader interviewing, a potential sales manager coming in below you, how does that change your recruitment process today?
Yeah. First, I will say that the first step in that recruitment process is finding a great partner to help you manage that recruitment process. So Talentfoot, thank you very much. We love working with you. A little plug for you guys. But no, I think that is so essential because it does start with having a shared mindset around the vision that I have in this case of the person that I want to hire, and working with someone that understands that vision and embraces it, and then really obviously goes out and finds the right kind of talent against which we're trying to hire. So it does start with that. But I think so much of it goes back to those I guess, both the soft and the hard skills. And you can look on a resume and see some of the hard skills, to your point, what are the results that you have driven, et cetera. So for me, it definitely over indexes on a lot of the qualities, the EQ, the curiosity, the belief in constantly iterating and constantly innovating to drive better, results, and being able to articulate in specificity the ways that you've done that in other organizations. Again, I can look at the output of your results, but I want to know how you got to those results. It's like the journey that it took you to get there versus the final output is what I'm really interested in. And I think that's where you can start to dig into a lot of other qualities. And I encourage people that I mentor and coach, make sure that you talk about the journey. You talk about the skill set that you bring and how you use that skill set to attack a problem, to attack an opportunity, to optimize a sales process, to convert a relationship, to grow a relationship, and that you can talk about the journey that got you there and the way that you thought about it. Because I think it's getting into that thinking process that is so interesting during the interview process, because the result is what it is. I want to know how you think. And I think that's how that for me has changed so dramatically from perhaps previously the way that I have previously hired or looked at resumes. It's like, I want to know the journey. I want you to be able to articulate it. And I want to get to know those qualities that you have. And through journey and storytelling, I can get underneath that in a much more effective manner.
And I think approaching it as you do, allowing those candidates to put their shields down and be vulnerable and say, hey, here's where some missteps happened. And here's what I learned from it. And here's what I improved upon, because that's what you talked about, iterative, improvement every single time. And if you can see that and have that deep conversation, that's when you know you not only have a hard skills match, you have a soft skills match, and you have a cultural match. Having worked with you, Trish, I know that's what you're looking for, that right-hand person that gets you. It's a symbiotic relationship that you can turn and know that this person's going to go and not only represent what you want in the marketplace, but DMS wants in the marketplace. And you know that they're driving their growth as well, their individual growth. And it's been wonderful to work with you. I'll give you a plug as well for DMS, because you're open to the, consulting that we bring to it, saying, hey, here's what the market is telling us. Here's what we're seeing, so these are some performers that we want to put in front of you that maybe you haven't thought about, and you're open to that. And it's a better partnership. And I've just seen that we get better candidates in front of you, and you get better hires because of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I think just one more point on that, Brian. I think the candidate coming in too with that ability to translate experience, their previous experience, into the impact that it has on culture, the impact that it has on the soft skills, the impact that it has on the job description that they're looking. I do think creativity is really important, both from being the hiring manager as well as being a candidate, which is, how do you translate what it is you've done in your career that matters most to what this organization is looking for? And so I think both of us coming with a more open mind, for example, we don't have to necessarily hire with a very specific skill. You must have this kind of experience. We could teach skills and things necessary that, are specific to our industry versus another industry. So the qualities that a candidate has that they bring to that, again, a lot of those softer qualities that they bring to the job that they learned from and can translate into what we're talking about in the interview process, I think has just been a really interesting way that everything has evolved. And it's so enjoyable, because it really makes for a really lively conversation in talking about business and what drives business and how they approach things. And to your point, the pluses, the minuses, the things I wouldn't repeat, things that I would repeat. And it just opens up a lot more conversation and lets you get under the hood of the true individual and what they bring to what they could bring to the organization.
Excellent. And I love where this sort of went with Trish and Brian, because Brian, I'm going to tee you up now with what are you seeing common missteps in market when looking to hire sales leaders? So we talked about what's working. Where are
Yeah.
we seeing it potentially go astray for people?
I think coming in with a preconceived notion, and not realizing where you are, meaning your company, where you are within the ecosphere. If you are a 20 to $50 million company and you're saying you need a sales leader and you want somebody who can roll up their sleeves, get it done, but you then specify that they need to come from Salesforce or Oracle, and I'm gonna caution you there. And the reason I'm gonna caution you is because Salesforce, Oracle, those names open doors. And what I'm hearing from you is you need somebody who can open the door for a company that may not have that name recognition. So I'm seeing that where they get entrenched in, we must have somebody from these, prestige companies, and they are great companies. But what I'd rather see for somebody at that level, say a 20 to $50 million company, who's done it and done that type of growth. I took you from 20 to 100, or took this company from 20 to 100 million in 3 years. That tells me a story that they understand where you are in your journey. Not I took, Salesforce from 1.5 billion to 1.7 billion. That isn't going to help you within your current situation. So understanding where you are in the marketplace, understanding what you currently need. Do you need an IC? Do you need an individual contributor? Do you need a player coach, or do you just need a coach? We need somebody who has that playbook, who can take them to the next level, up level some of our conversations we're having. We're at a director level at many of our large enterprise, and we need to get up to something more strategic. We need to get to the C-suite. We need to get to an EVP level. Have they done that before? Talk them through that. So I think coming into it with the flexibility to say, okay, I know we want these types of traits and we want them to fit into our culture. And here's where we are. Now let's go out and find that person.
Yeah.
I think that's very spot on in terms of where is the company, because a sales leader means so many different things based on the size of company and what their goals are. I think someone in the chat in the comments was saying, does a player coach work in a big organization? It works definitely. It's required in a small organization, right? You can't have only a business leader who only does strategy, right? It doesn't work for like a Series A or Series B company. You need someone who can roll up their sleeves and get in front of clients, and also potentially has a quota themselves. But that is very different as companies, evolve and grow and need, a different type of leader over time. And I think it's really important for both the sales leaders as well as the companies to be completely honest about that too. To say, are we really, we want to hire a CRO. Do we really need a CRO right now? Or do we just need someone to really help, grow our ARR this year very specifically? So it's a real honest conversation between, what are we really looking for in the company?
Yeah.
And I think there's a great thing there in market for the sales leader is figure out where your sweet spot is. What chunk of that company's growth pattern do you play best in? Are you happiest in? Do you perform best in? And focus your career around that area. I think, gone are the days of you're the leader that comes in and does 0 to 250 million, right? Like, you are going to niche yourself in an area of growth in a business, and that's build your career around that. There's nothing wrong with, I think people that I often talk to early in sales leadership try to be every leader. And right. You're not. Be a leader in the area of business growth that you do best in and that you enjoy most. And that's where you will succeed and help companies in their growth pattern.
Yeah, I think that's such a great point, Ryan, is really understanding your strengths and the desire that you have, the kind of company you want to work with. Sometimes you find candidates and you could just tell that they want to be all things to all people, no matter who they're interviewing with. And it's really about saying, this is what I want. And I do think gone are the days where it's the employer saying, this is the role and you fit it or don't. I do think it's incumbent upon candidates too, to decide, what is it am I a builder? Is this an organization that needs a builder? Is this an organization that already has everything in place and I am optimizing and I'm taking it and evolving it to the next level of success? And do I have the experience in doing that? or do I have the experience in really reshaping something from the bottoms up? And to your point, Ryan, being very truthful to yourself, but also then finding the organization that aligns with what you're best at. And that's where you'll have the greatest success ultimately.
Excellent. And then if we think of sort of taking that conversation into how do you start as a sales leader to build the new skill sets? How do you create that roadmap for capabilities? Trish, any thoughts there for?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's where the organization is so critical in helping to fulfill on that. And I'm literally living through this, so I feel like it's very current. And I think it starts, I do believe that it starts with the organization defining exactly what we want the sales organization and its leaders within to be. How has that evolved over time? What does it look like, not just for today, but as we think about our own growth and the growth ambitions that we have, where do we want our leaders to go, and setting up the expectations around that. So it isn't just doing things like self-assessments, 360, it's all of that against the vision of where we want a sales team, a sales leadership, whatever however it's defined, to go, so that there's always a destination that we're trying to get at, and that our employees also know when they join us, this is where we want to go. And we're living through this right now. We've developed a kind of a simple 3-phase process, but it's the assessment phase, again, self-assessment, 360-degree skill gap analysis. We've got a lot of people in place, so we're not going to change them overnight. So there has to be an evolution of how we do it. It started with us articulating what we want it to be. And then it's like, where do you sit specific to our vision? Where then, based on that, what are the capabilities that you need to develop? And it's incumbent upon us to provide the leadership training, the mentorship, on-job learning opportunities, et cetera. And then also the continuous feedback loop. We've moved from annual reviews to quarterly reviews, and we have incentives specifically around mastering the competencies of your position that we have now defined for you. And we'll provide lots of training and development for that. And then the performance support phase, which is really tools and resource and metrics and dashboards and recognition and rewards. It's something that, again, we have built into our updated incentive program, how mastering the competencies yields a reward. And I think that's very important to have all of those things, but it definitely starts with the company saying, what do we want this sales organization to look like? And all the various parts and pieces and people that are part of that organization, where do they currently sit? And then how do we get them to the new vision of where we want to go as an organization from a sales perspective. So it's been a really interesting, it's a lot of work, and understanding, currently how did we get to where we get, but importantly, where do we want to go? And then what's the roadmap for that?
I think to that is the job that the company is doing in providing that roadmap and understanding transparency into what does that sales organization looks like. What that translates to is it gives the sales leaders and the sales reps and the employees the purpose and the motivation. So they very clearly understand, what is my next step? Where do I need to be? How am I getting paid? Right? Like we're all sales leaders. How am I getting paid, and where do I want to be? And having full transparency and no back and forth is really, really important, particularly for sales folks, right? Sales folks work really, really hard. They spend a lot of time, most sales people spend a lot of time on the road, away from their family. So what is the reward that they're getting back? How do they get to the place they want to be as a sales leader? So all that transparency is really important. I've always joined organizations. I look at organizations from an impact standpoint. What is this company doing that's impactful in the industry? What problem are they trying to solve? Then that gives me personally the purpose when I think about, and the motivation for myself. For others, you really need to have a purpose, right? You're doing this day in, day out. What is your purpose? What is your motivation? So all of that really creates in that motivation for folks to really look forward and to work really hard for companies as well.
Yeah.
Perfect. We are coming up on time. I'm sure we could continue to dig in much deeper. Want to sort of wrap up this section before we jump into some questions. Going to go around the room. Sort of advice, top 2 tips, or a piece of advice you'd give today's sales leaders. We'll start with Trish.
This has been sort of my advice for anyone I've ever talked to in any career path. It's stay informed and stay curious. I think when you can bring that level of interest, intelligence, insight, perspective into the conversation, whether it's in an interview process or with a prospective client, the more you know, the more you learn, the better you are, the more curious you are. So stay curious, stay informed, and continue to live your position and your role like that.
100% agree with Trish. Staying the curious, you stay on top of market trends, you stay on top of market tools, you stay on top of what are the client problems, right? Because what you're doing at the end of the day is trying to solve that client problem. That's what matters to them. The other thing that I would suggest too is build your brand. What is your brand out there in the marketplace? As sales leaders, are you, some of the basics, right? Are you speaking at conferences? What are your speaking engagements? What's your brand on LinkedIn? Are you writing? There's a lot of work that goes into building a brand, but that will pay dividends overall for both the firm and yourself in your current role and in ongoing roles. I think that's really important, kind of new world and that we need to really assess. And I also know that it's not super comfortable for a lot of people to put themselves out there and say, hey, this is who I am as a person, not just as a company, but it's something that you should think about. What is my brand out there in the marketplace?
Yeah, no question. And I'll, jump onto what both of you said. Be curious, be a lifelong learner. It shows up every time you have a conversation with somebody. And it shows if you're a listener, be listening for what, Michelle, like you had alluded to, the problems that you're trying to solve for the client. But if you're on the other side, if you're a candidate, what are you trying to solve for this potential employer? What are the problems you're trying to solve and what can you bring? Know your metrics, yes, but also know your stories and be able to tell them concisely. And here's the problem that I was faced with. Here's what I did to implement changes, and here was the outcome. And be able to do that in a short period of time, and then be seen, like you said, Michelle, as a thought leader within your industry, within your brand. Because if you're seen as that and you're seen as someone who wants to be invited up to be that speaker, guess what? You're going to be wanted by employers as well.
That's right. I had one other thought, just building on that, if I may. I think and I think we talked about it early on, but the consultative selling, but I think it is about ultimately creating trust with your employer, with the person that you're talking about, creating trust with your client. I do, in the end, there's a lot of great organizations out there. So when you're selling, you're competing against a lot of other people. And I've been told more times than once that the reason that we chose you is because we trusted you, me, or the person that you would have our back, that no matter what, you were there for us. You would pivot if we needed to pivot. You would always dig deeper. You would always have that curiosity. You would always be the one that knows the business as well as we do. We trust you. And people ultimately hire from their hearts. They do. You can look at a resume, you can look at a pitch and say, yes, 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 it all checks the boxes, because it always will. But it is ultimately, I think, have you demonstrated and communicated enough around what drives trust? And people ultimately make choices from their head. They'll screen with their head, but they'll make choices from their heart. And I think whether it's the interview process or in the pitching process, that's where it comes from. And so don't underestimate the importance of being yourself and bringing all these qualities that we talked about to the story and to the pitch process. It goes so far, and you're trying to create that trust, because that's what they're going to hire you ultimately for.
Absolutely. And I agree with all of this. And I think that the piece that I'll add to that is sort of a callback to what I said earlier, is just know where you play best and where you succeed as a sales leader, because it can help shape your entire career versus trying to be the sales leader to everybody. You'll shine when you figure out where it is you play best in organizations in their growth pattern. We'll throw it over to some questions that came up from the group. So first one up is, and anybody can chime in to sort of answer these. What are some of the unique KPIs or metrics that you look to now as a sales leader that were different than sort of previous?
I mean, for me specifically, it's like real-time problem solving. It is not allowing, again, we're a performance marketing organization. And so every day we are looking at data and insights by the data, and can you pivot around what is and isn't working and find new ways of creating success for your clients. So people that can in real time pivot and be bringing that, again, that agility, but that ability to glean an insight and then to problem solve. Problem solving is, again, cannot be underestimated in any business, but especially in ours, that is a real time. We get paid for the leads that we sent. So we've got to problem solve and get very comfortable with that. And you'll make some good choices and some bad choices, but in the end, you'll learn from everything. And as long as you're moving this way, it's all good.
Perfect. If we had to think sort of in terms of favorite interview questions, when you get into, I'm going to sort of kick this one off because I'm a little biased here. This is my favorite question. And it, oddly enough, it's how do you, favorite interview question to find pretenders from performers? And this one's going to come a little out of left field. But I always want to hear people's most significant accomplishment. What are you most proud of? What do you wear as a badge of honor in your career? The caveat I will give is I don't want a revenue story. And what you get back is often very telling about the sales leader and the growth that they've driven and how they lead their team, that I think it's a question that people sometimes overlook or think is just a culture related question, but actually starts to give me a ton of insight around who you are as an individual and how you lead.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting.
I think that's a great question. I think we talked about earlier in terms of the how also is a great question. So getting specific on the process, either a failure or a win or whatever the process is. I think Brian, you had mentioned, there's, how do you tell a story in a concise way? How do you frame the question? A lot of folks look at Amazon and their interview process and how they, ask and the type of responses they expect, and a lot of practicing. It's a really great tool to practice just the type of interview questions or responses that you want to give. They're very specific and structural about how they ask for responses.
Yeah.
I like asking, once a candidate knows a little bit about the position in the company, what's the biggest hurdle you see for scaling them, whatever that goal is that this client has, scaling them to that next level. What's the hurdle you see in the next 12 to 18 months? And let them talk through that, because what you're doing is you're really diving into their thought process of building out, here's the challenge, and here's what I would do, and here's what I would adjust as I go along. And to see if they see any blind spots or things that are going to come in, because it always happens. Trish, I think you alluded to this. Change, constant. So how are you going to adjust for that? So those are the things I look for.
Great question.
Excellent. So next question, this one will likely be the last one, just as we come up on time. What's the number one thing that separates today's best sellers from the rest? What are the people at the top in the sales world doing differently?
I think the EQ is a big one for me. You're creating, as Trish said, the trust. You're having that empathy. You're creating that connection. At the end of the day, that creates a more in-depth client, more in-depth partnership, and a longer-term partnership. What is your goal for the sale? Is it, are you looking at, are you selling? It's a very transactional sales. In most cases, it's a longer, multi-year, multi-million-dollar product sale that you're looking at, or a service sale. How are you creating that over time? And that's really important, again, as not just in your current role, but as you think about next steps, right? Everyone goes somewhere else. Most people go somewhere else. So you figure, they're going to go somewhere else where you potentially may want to chat with them again. And so creating that trust with them pays dividends.
Yeah. And I just to add another thought is just this whole perpetual beta mentality, I think, too, which is never accepting that just because it worked before that it's going to continue working. So whether that's your pitch, your strategy, pretty much anything in life, that the marketplace is too dynamic and too crazy, and the consumer is constantly changing. Your audience is constantly changing. And think about marketers today and clients today, they are under so much more scrutiny and demand than they ever have been. And so just being comfortable with pivoting. And I tell everyone, it's like, and don't, even if it was bad, you still learn from it. And then we just pivot. It's okay. And if you put something in place and it doesn't work, learn from it and adjust. And giving people almost the freedom to do that, I have found has really been helpful. But that you have to also accept it, that I can accept living in a perpetual beta world. It's a much more fun place to live, I have to say, than trying to get it always right all of the time, which is like impossible.
That's a freedom to fail.
Freedom to fail. Yeah, great. Much better said. Perpetual beta, freedom to fail. I love it, Brian. That's why we work so well together.
Absolutely.
I think the other thing too is, the market's always changing. Competitors are always changing. Competitors are always
right.
So whatever you're doing
Absolutely.
last year, that won you that one deal, that got you to your team moving, things are always shifting. So always being on top of what's moving in the marketplace. What are your competitors doing? Again, to my comment earlier, you have less at bats now. So when you get in front of a particular client, you must know the story. You must know their story. You must know at that time and place, what are they trying to solve? And what are competitors saying? Not just from pricing, but tools and roadmap and kind of everything. So again, that back to be curious. Always be curious about what everyone's doing.
Yep.
Right.
Excellent.
Yeah. And I think that's, you nailed it. Just be curious. Learn perpetually.
Yeah.
Excellent. We are up on time. Michelle, Trish, Brian, thank you so much for all the insights today. Hope everybody here in LinkedIn took a great deal from it. I know I learned as well today, so that's fantastic. Talentfoot does want to offer, so those listening, if you're looking to scale or retool your team, we're offering a complimentary talent planning session for your team. Please reach out to us. You can do that at info@talentfoot.com. You can reach out to Brian or myself if we're connected on LinkedIn. Happy to help. Again, Michelle, Trish, thanks for your time, and hope everybody has a great day.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Ryan.
Have a great day, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.